Are we live? Are we live? Are we live right now, people? This is the first time I've done a live on my YouTube, so it's kind of a test. Just a check run. Testing one, check 2, 3. Uh-oh. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2. Wonder why we have an echo. I can turn that down. Does that help? I think we're on a delay. So I'm going to mute that. Can you hear me now? How's it sound now? Are we cool? What's it say? Yeah. You want to practice with me? You want to hang out with me? Guess what we're going to talk about today? Guess who we're remembering today? Yes, we are remembering Mr. Gary Moore. I think this was I figured I'd start out by just showing a few albums and getting us in the mood while people check in. This was the first album. This was the first album that I ever picked up by the man, the myth, the legend. It's a bomb. I mean, just come on now. Come on now, people. Look at that. I figure we talk about Gary Moore and do a little, the governor, do a little Gary Moore-esque guitar lesson. How about a little end of the world solo note for note played the right way? I've seen some people attempting that. I figured I'd show you what I sussed out on it. This is one of the early ones I got. You got to have, look at him right there, man. Black Rose. This is a great, great album. The best Thin Lizzy lineup for my money. Of course, you got to have 2 copies of this one. This is, I think, one of my favorites, if not my favorite Gary Moore album. It's very different. It's G-Force. All right. This is a Japanese import. All right. So I made sure I had 2 of them for safekeeping. This album goes way back. White Knuckles, that's reminiscent of the solo we're going to suss out on Into the World today. Rockin' and a Rollin', She's Got You is just out of hand. Hot Gossip. You Kiss Me Sweetly. He used his guitar straight into the board on this, which was almost unheard of to get a great tone. And his tone is amazing on this album. So these are highly recommended must-hear Gary Moore outings. Of course, Victims of the Future. Each and every one of us. All right. That's probably his heaviest. That's got the title track, Teenage Idol, Devil in Her Heart. Empty Rooms is beautiful. The great remake of Shapes of Things, Murder in the Skies, Hold On to Love, The Law of the Jungle, produced by Jeff Glicksman. A fine one. Is this fun so far? You know, I can do more of these on different artists. I figured that if I figured out all these solos note for note and spent all this time, I might as well make use of it. This is a great one, right? Wild Frontier. And the album in question today. This was a big one for me. Let's zoom right in there. All the great tunes on this, Don't Take Me for a Loser. I'm Always Gonna Love You, Wishing Well. Gonna Break My Heart Again, I'm Falling in Love with You. Rockin' Every Night, Cold Hearted. The track we're going to tackle today, End of the World, appropriately enough. This is a great album. Have them all on vinyl. Proud to say. Okay, what do we have here? All you're going to need for this lesson today is your git fiddle, your guitar, sounds perfect, sounds good, cool. So I figured, most people aren't going to catch this live, and they can check it out later, and you can always come back and take it section by section, pause it, rewind it at your leisure, and enjoy the fine guitar stylings of Gary Moore as interpreted by yours truly here today. So tune to E standard. Let's just all check out our tuning, all right? I got a handy Fender tuner. And as I show you the solo, I'll make a few points along the way. Because whether you want to play this solo exact or just take some of the elements that we're talking about, that's up to you, right? But the gist of this is just to give you, I'm going to break the solo down into a few different sections and the logical points for each cell that each cell starts in. And we'll just break them down, and I'll show you a few tricks how to perform them. And if you got any questions, maybe we can do that at the end, or just leave them in the chat and I can go back afterward and answer them. I want to mention off the top that if you enjoy this lesson, for sure, let me know. I'll be doing some more. I can do more of these, whether pre-recorded or live like this. I also offer Skype lessons, very reasonable rates, 60 or 90 minutes, and all levels, all styles. I know a lot of people are intimidated. They leave messages, Jeff, I'm nowhere near as good as you are. I'll have to practice. The idea, I'd rather you come to me now so I could help you undo some bad habits or prevent you from getting into any bad habits that you might have. I got to get used to looking right at the camera right there. But I'm used to doing the radio show. Got to get used to the YouTube lives. Cool, people. All right, so let's dive into this. And if you got any guitar playing friends, just let them know to come check this lesson. They might enjoy it. I have a pig nose I'm playing. Let me just say a couple things off the top. When I practice, and this is my recommendation to each and every one of you, when I practice, I don't want to move the camera, but I posted pictures, and I can post one at the end of this lesson. You can see the exact setup I use, but right now I'm going out of my Strat, through my floor pedals. The only thing I have on is the Boss GE7 equalizer and the Flashback TC Electronic Flashback 4. And I did a Randy Rhoads, I think that's the last video on this channel. You can check that out where I actually show all this stuff so you can see the amp and the whole chain here. Just a 57 mic going into a Mackie board that's going USB into my laptop, and it's a very clean sound. Hear that? I don't like practicing with a very distorted sound. Right, and I had the volume down on that. So I like to practice with a clean sound with not much gain on it for a couple reasons. And I'm going to tell you a little story. A buddy of mine, I was just talking to him, and he was talking about working on one of Shania Twain's albums with Mutt Lange, who also worked with AC/DC and Angus Young. And he was playing a rhythm part, just, a chord of some kind. And he went to, lay into it. And Mutt Lange was like, play softer. And he was kind of taken back. He's like, don't hit so hard. And it was a rock and roll kind of rocking part. And it kind of took him back. And he did it again. He's don't hit it so hard, lighter. It'll sound bigger if you hit it lighter. And he was all perplexed and confused. Because you see, especially a lot of these metal guys just really laying into it, and they got the stiff arm and they're putting all this pressure. But what he finally realized, and what Mutt explained to him, is that he said Angus has a really light touch. He plays so lightly, and he lets the amp do the work, because if you hit the guitar too hard with the pickups, and the signal that you're sending into the pickups, you're basically magnifying your attack right here. You're sending it a little bit too hot into the amp. And there's, of course, times where you're going to want to lay into it to get a certain effect. But starting out where we're starting, with these delicate classical-oriented trills on the high E string and all the way down, descending, we're going to want to start with a light attack. And you can use your pick like a gas pedal. That's the way I explain it to my students. You don't have to play very loud. You don't have to pick very loud. Right? That's just a straight pentatonic 5-note scale right there. Right? And you see it was pretty blisteringly fast for just coming out of the gate and not putting a lot of pressure on the strings, right? Make sense? All right. So that's just a little front end, and that was just a little pentatonic, just the 5-note. I've remapped that shape, as you noticed, for the way I pick. We could talk about that in Skype lessons, but for this first section, there's a chordal intro. Again, right here, here's some chords. You don't need to wail those so hard, but one thing that I always do when I play those chords in the intro, I also play the note before. You've got a perfect fourth before. Makes it sound a little heavier, right? To the G, so you're going B, C, G. Or you can play it. Let's just let's use this example right here just to talk about something right out of the gate. I was just watching one of my friends picking yesterday on a video they posted, and they were stiff arming it like this. Okay, that's not how we want to pick. The motion is not from the elbow moving like this, and I see a lot of people doing this like they're, you know what that looks like you're doing? It's more like screwing a screwdriver in. You pivot from the elbow like this to get that motion. It's the Eddie Van Halen thing. It's the tremolo, right? Right? And you want to, it's all from here. Even when I was playing that bluesy kind of swing Django kind of progression at the top. See how the arm, it's like that. push a little harder on the gas if you want. Kind of Gary Moore would do kind of maybe this more in his blues era of his career, right? So that's an important thing, I think, to get the speed. And as we get later into some of the really fast elements of the picking here, right? Is everything cool with the camera? I think it's cool, right? Any questions so far in the chat? We cool? All right, so the first phrase that he does, it's a quasi-classical motif, quasi-classical hammering lick, utilizing open strings, descending on each string, and we're going to just start it. It starts with a downstroke, a staccato, muting. We'll talk about staccato and legato here during this session, because it's a key thing. I think more than how hard you pick, and again, we can add the gas when we need it, but the articulation comes from how short and snappy you pick, or more long and legato, right? So for this first section, it's a downstroke. He's just literally mute, and he mutes that note with the palm of the hand here, and then you're going to come here with an upstroke. So that's the first motion is, and then you're just going to pull off with your pinky right there. Now, the next three notes are going to be downstrokes right here, right? Just practice that a minute like that. You're just softly. And let me mention something right here, that a big thing about how I pick, and luckily I had some really great teachers help me with my picking, Tuck Andrus, George Benson, Frank Gambale, Yngwie Malmsteen. I got to hang out with Yngwie backstage on the Alcatraz tour in Pasadena when he played in California. Cheers. Watermelon juice. So when you get to watch someone who's really phenomenal or a virtuoso play up close, and if you're paying attention, you can notice stuff, you can learn stuff. And the main thing about picking, and especially for a lick like what we're about to do, because you don't want other strings ringing. I mean, you never want other strings ringing when you don't want them ringing, right? Sometimes guitar players will give Jimmy Page a hard time for like his Heartbreaker solo and some of his solos because he's bumping into the other strings. And you hear the what we would call sloppiness, right? It's a little bit sloppy, which is cool, and it works for his style. But the reason why a lot of players, especially players who start playing with a pick, with a guitar pick, bump into the other strings, and it's something that I really learned once I started getting into flamenco and classical a lot more, because if you don't play with a pick, you never learn this side-to-side motion. Because when we grew up watching like people strum the guitar on Hee Haw and Ed Sullivan, and it's called a downstroke and an upstroke, we get this very ceiling to ground perspective, from our head to our toes, moving the guitar in this direction, which really short circuits the energy of the guitar, because the guitar is really like a speaker cabinet, and it's made to work like this. If you think of an acoustic guitar, as I'm looking at mine, the back and the sides of the cabinet, and the top is like your cone or the pebble in the pond. And when you touch the guitar, it creates the ripple in the pond, or the ripple of sound, the sound wave, right? So players who begin on fingerstyle, classical players, one of the first exercise that you do, and if you've ever watched the Eric Johnson Art of Guitar video, he talks about the bounce technique. Just to get a note to sound, on a classical or flamenco guitar, right? Right? To get that kind of vibe, you're pushing the strings in and everything is about bouncing, and the softer, it's like a trampoline. I give my students that analogy. Think of this area like a trampoline or a drum head, and you're going to just bounce on it. Just like when you're a kid, you start, and the harder you bounce, the more volume you get, right? Right? And it's the same with a pick. So when we're picking, we're really trying to make the strings go inwards towards the body or towards the pick guard, not up and down. The reason you're bumping into other strings is because you're putting this pick into another string. If you push down with the pick, for example, a classical, like if I was to play just a quasi chromatic exercise on a flamenco guitar, I would play it like that, and you see I'm pushing. You're just bouncing, and you're also muting the string below with your thumb, which is a great bonus. And you can do it without really paying much attention. It's effortless. And this is a motion that a lot of players who play with a pick don't really get, that with a pick, all you're doing, is closing your fingers from classical position and put a pick in there, and you're just bouncing the pick now. It's like you're bouncing on a high wire. You're in Cirque du Soleil. You just saw my mug. And this is a huge thing I'm sharing right here, because think about it. If you're constantly pushing the strings inward, and it's tricky on an upstroke, and that's something we almost need to SKYPE lesson to really help you craft your upstroke, because it's more like yanking back. I call it like a push stroke, and then my upstrokes like yank back like that. But if you get that motion, just sit around watching TV and let your nerve bundle at the base of your spine do the work. That's where all our dexterity comes from, not the brain. You want to watch some TV, get your brain out of the equation, so you're not judging your playing, you're not judging yourself, and you just start bouncing on that high wire, right? See what I'm saying? So in this example with the Gary Moore, as you go down, you're pushing in, and we're going to be doing all down strokes, right? Except for this upstroke here, because there's no way to get any speed if you went down, down. So you got to go down, up, down, right? Like that. So you're going down. You're pulling off at the 12th, 10th, 8th, and 7th. Just get that much, and then we'll go to the next string where you're going to do the same shape with 4, 2, and 1 right here. Real light. We're not worrying about putting any harmonics with the thumb in it yet. We just want to get the notes perfect right. So just get that much, okay? Then you're going to have to shift down with your first finger. Right there. So far we got right. Then we're going to come right down here into 4th position, 7th fret, 5th fret, 4th fret on both strings, both on the G string and the D string. Then we're going to 3rd finger on the 5th fret A string, So the whole progression in slow motion goes. Then his second phrase, he stops right there with vibrato right there, and I pull it down. You know, there's two ways to do vibrato, and sometimes I'll do it both ways. I'll go, that's a great little trick to get that double vibrato. But in this case, as I come down, and Gary Moore's vibrato is very wide and powerful, right? And it's not pushing down here. It's rocking energy again. Both arms work like a screwdriver. When you do vibrato or you pick, you're going like this, just like you're revving up a motorcycle, right? So now right here, that's a great time to just work that bouncing right there. And that's why I wanted to do this today, because there's so many elements of this solo that no matter what level of playing, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, they're great to work on to, you know, help keep your fingers alive, so to speak. Okay, so that last time again is going to be. And there's a staccato thing right there. All right, feel that? And you're going to pull off, you bump, choke, and you're going to be B, C, B, A, G, F sharp, E, then we're going to climb up. But let's think about that little part again. How beautiful. It's almost like a classical motif again that he plays. And with vibrato, that's staccato with the pull. And then give the vibrato right there, there, and then an open note, and you're going to climb to the F sharp with vibrato. And again, this is another example where you can just whack the string as you're climbing, because you're pushing the string in that way, almost like your pick is a drumstick. Right from the B, you're going to slide up. And I use 2, 1, and 3, and I'll show you why. And I go to the C, right? Actually, I go to the D. Sliding from the D to the E. And then here again with the first finger. And here's why I do the third. Because you're right here as you slide up to the E position on the D string to go right across. Right. That's how he plays it. You can add a little bit more attitude if you want to do. So that's the first phrase, couple phrases right there. We got the open string section, And then this beautiful, bluesy, crying. That's where, guitar is, the most loved instrument, even more than piano, because we can make it sing like a voice. We can give it that vibrato, right? Now this next lick is the hardest lick, and I see guys who try to play this Gary Moore lick, and aside from John Sykes and maybe John Norm, I haven't seen anyone really do it right, but I'm here to show you. Here's the trick, because people, when they attempt this lick, they always hammer right here, and this is the trick of this next lick. It's a jazz type lick that he's doing right here, and he's moving in half steps. So you're going to start on the D string at the 10th fret with some wicked Gary vibrato. We call that more vibrato, right? Very helpful, cool. I'm glad it's helping. But check it out, I'll help you out some more. And again, this is just the first lesson. I'm just getting used to the live thing, and we can do more. And once I settle into this whole thing, it'll be a lot more interactive and what have you. But so we're going to start right here on the D string at the 10th fret with the vibrato again, this way, not this way. Now, this is the thing that I don't see cats doing right when they try to do this Gary Moore phrase, this motif. Is it where I can move this mic a little closer? So the trick to this lick is you got to pick that. You're going to pick with an upstroke, hammer, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. See? Pick, up, down, hammer, down. Sorry. There's no downstroke there. Down, up, hammer, up, down. So there's two upstrokes in a row. It's not quite sweep picking, but that's the trick to get that lick fast. Check it out. Right? There it is. When you hammer it like that, I hear guys trying to struggle and hammer it because they're not picking that note that needs to be picked. They don't got the picking sequence right. And I always think about picking, it's like a dancer choreographing their steps. And if you don't choreograph your steps properly, you're going to trip over your own feet, right? So that's the secret to that Gary Moore motif right there, is you got to go down, up. I did it in the Maybe Tomorrow solo. If you check the video, I do that lick there. There's a lick in My Darkest Hour on Megadeth. Very Gary. I was listening to a lot of Gary Moore at the time when I got the offer for Megadeth. So part way into the solo, I think it's the third or fourth phrase in my solo on In My Darkest Hour, I do that same, and I take it up right here. And right there's another example of In My Darkest Hour with that pushing of the, where you're just bouncing on the high wire this way, because your guitar wants to work like this. This is, you got 6 bow and arrows right here. Tied up here, tied down here. If you don't shoot a bow and arrow by pulling the string, the twine this way or this way. So you don't want to make the strings go this way. You got to make all the energy go this way. It's the physics of guitar. Anytime you're making the energy go like this, you're short-circuiting. It's like choking a singer off at the vocal cords, right? So all the energy when I play, even on that blues progression that I did at the beginning, I'm bouncing inward. And if you saw my hand in slow motion as I cross the string on a downstroke, every downstroke pushes just like my thumb would if you went like this, pushing in, and every upstroke pushes in towards the body as if you were doing that. And I do that by, because it's like a paintbrush. and the pick drags. I hold the pick very loosely, and it drags behind on the upstrokes. Again, upstrokes is the hardest thing to do on guitar. I spent 4 years just working on that these past 4 years. And I'm just starting to incorporate some of the results in my solos. But if you want to check into some SKYPE lessons, we can really work on those upstrokes and help you on that. But the good news on this, and downstrokes is one of the most used strokes in metal. That's why so many songs going like this, right? With the downstrokes. So the good news is the beginning of aside from that down up, you're doing all downstrokes here. So this is a great little melody where you're playing music, not Mary Had a Little Lamb, where you can work on that bouncing technique, right? And again, as long as you're going inward, you can hit the strings as hard as you want and as wildly as you want, and you're not going to hit any other strings. It's only when you direct your pick and bump into the string, but there's no string to hit in there, okay? So the same with this picking pattern here. And I mute it, and I'll play it both ways, muted and unmuted. So again, the trick with this, to get that Gary Moore vibe, is you got to go down, up, hammer, up, down, up, down. See that? And then let's take it up. Then he takes it up one octave. He takes it up to the 13th fret here, right? On the B string to the 12th fret. It's the same fingers. See the picking? Down, up, hammer. And then he hits that note. Then he starts doing that Eddie Van Halen kind of tremolo we were talking at the 12th fret. Then we're going to slide it up to the 16th fret, up to the 19th fret, back to the 16th fret on the B string, and then to the 17th fret with the wild Gary Moore vibrato. And then he comes up here to the top fret. And you'll be wishing you were on hot 8s for your high E like I am, 8 through 46. To hit this note right here, right? Right? At the very top fret on your stret. Then he comes down here. Now we're going to go diminished on it for this last phrase here. And it's all in half steps diminished. Randy Rhoads was hugely influenced by Gary Moore. And you can hear Randy doing this kind of vibe as well. We're going to start at the 12th fret, just trills with the second finger. Very classical sounding, just right there. And you're going to come down here and staying in the E position. Right there. Then you're going to jump up a fret. So it's... Then right here on the E, then you come into the power chords, where it says, right? So that's Into the World. Gary Moore solo broke down bit by bit. Let me, I'll step up and look at the chat. So cool. I've read everything in the chat. What I want you to do is, if you dug the lesson, you could share it with your mates, right? Share it around. And I'll do some more, maybe give some requests. I could definitely do some Randy Rhoads, some Van Halen, Spanish Fly. The intro, Woman in Love's pretty cool and tricky. I don't see a lot of people trying that. Yngwie Malmsteen stuff. There's already some Yngwie stuff you can see on my YouTube here. But give me some request stuff you'd like to see. I'll even show you some of my cool original stuff. And I'm actually thinking about next weekend, maybe a week from tomorrow, on my Stage It page. If you check out Stage It, it's a great, especially in these trying times we're living in. If you check out my Stage It page, I think everyone from like Bon Jovi to Lita Ford to Jason Mraz, so many people, to Jeff Young, have done concerts. I've done other workshops on Stage It. It's a pay-per-view. It's just like this. I think I did Hook and Mouth once. I'm going to do In My Darkest Hour next weekend, how to play all my key parts. The intro, the beautiful intro to In My Darkest Hour, right? The weird chords in that intro, and then all my solo, and maybe some other bits and other key talking points about that tune, performance notes, maybe some memories of recording the solos and the rhythms for that track in the album. So if that sounds like fun, join me again here and let your friends know. It's youtube.com/jeffyoungtube is my link. And be sure to check out my instrumentalguitar.net is my official webpage. And the radio show every Tuesday night, Music Without Boundaries, is jeffyoungjams.com. This Tuesday night, got a really cool show ahead for you. And hope you'll tune in and join me. We all got nothing better to do on lockdown, right? So thanks a lot for talking Gary with me. I could talk a lot more about Mr. Moore. I could talk a lot more, but we'll keep this lesson this long as a sound check. This is my first live. And cool, people. Glad you like it. If you missed any portion, go back. I think it'll be available. You can watch the whole deal and learn how to play Gary Moore's solo from End of the World. He played it on Corridors of Power. He had his Strat, so I made sure to have my Strat out today. And the solo is on this album, if you want to check it out. It's the first track on side 2. Gary Moore, great lead guitar and vocals on this album. Ian Pace from Deep Purple on drums. Neil Murray on bass guitar. Then he also stint with Whitesnake, and Tommy Iyer on keyboards. Jack Bruce singing the vocals also on End of the World. He's kicking in there. And actually Bobby, they would give me a name I can't pronounce. The drummer on End of the World is Bobby Choulinard. Cool. So great album, great solo, great guitar player. The Irish, iconic virtuoso Gary Moore. And I'm Jeff Young, signing off from the Treehouse in Babylon, New York. We'll see you again soon. We'll see ya.